Death is the unyielding truth that binds us all, an inevitable, profound, and deeply intimate encounter with the finite nature of life. It arrives without warning, shattering the world we thought we knew. In its wake, grief emerges, often dismissed as something to fix or get over. But what if grief, in its suffocating pain, is not a burden to carry or something from which we need to move on? What if grief is instead a sacred invitation, an opening to feel more deeply, to connect in unimaginable ways, and to transform all that we knew to be true? I'm Laura Walton, and I'm so grateful you're here. Together, let's step into the uncharted terrain of death and grief, not as something to fear or avoid, but as a force that shapes us, breaks us, and ultimately remakes us. Let's meet it not with resistance, but with curiosity and courage. And let's do this on purpose. Okay. All right. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
We're here with a very, very special guest, Bridget Tremblay. Thank you for being here today, Bridget.
I'm honored. Thank you.
So I want to hear your perspective first, just of kind of how we know each other.
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, how my perspective on how we know each other. Well, we know each other from a 2005 group interview for a yoga company, clothing company, someone may know, called Lululemon. But it was, back in the day, not a public, company.
Yeah,
so it was
nobody knew Lululemon in those
Nobody
days.
knew Lululemon. We didn't even know Lululemon. Anyway, there was a lot of people that showed up that day for this interview. And lo and behold, there were 3 people that got hired. And me, you, and our lovely friend, Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy. And ever since then, it was like, it wasn't an instant connection, but I knew there was an energetic pull to you. I knew that you were not a gregarious person, not a seemingly extroverted person, but I knew that there was depth. And I was also very, very young, but something drew me to you. And I just remember, I really just randomly, hey, you want to go to Vegas with me? Again, early 20s, living in LA. This is what we do. And then it was from that trip, it was like, yeah, my intuitions were right about her. And so we just, maybe you can fill in some blanks too, but I felt, what's the word? I want to try to use my words wisely. An intuition, a safety, and a bond, even though I just met you. And ever since then, we kind of were inseparable. We did everything together. We did our workout classes together. We lived together for a while. We did everything. And it was the best time, honestly, being out there in LA. And I was there for about 12 years. And really, you were only out there for a year or a year and a half or something like that. And it seemed like a lifetime. And so it was just so magnetic, our connection. And sometimes I can't put the finger on it, and that's okay. With how our connection is. Again, I'm speaking on, I don't want to speak for you, but that's my experience.
Yeah, well, same. And God, I think just the fact that whole period was only a year and a half.
I know.
Maybe just that speaks to it, because that feels like that could have been 20 years of our lives.
Yeah.
The amount of time and the depth of time that we spent together during that period of our lives, I think changed my life, changed your life.
And mine
too.
Yeah, totally. Yes. Agreed.
Yeah. So that was back in the early to mid 2000s when we both lived in LA.
Right.
So you live in Portland, or outside of, I should say, Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
So can you just share a little bit about how now, 20 some years later, kind of what your life looks like now, what you're up to these days?
Sure. Yeah. So I left LA in 2016. I did all my schooling out there. I got my master's and my doctoral degree, and I did all my internships out there. I moved here after all of that and bought a home in Portland, Maine. We bought the home sight unseen. We were just ready to get out of LA. And I was pregnant at the time and lived in Portland for like 3 or 4 years. And then we built a home in Yarmouth, Maine, which is about 15 minutes away from Portland. My life here now, so drastically different. Again, like to your words, it's like it's like a lifetime. It's like a foreign life. Looking at I wish I could just show you. I'm looking at a forest, whereas I was living in LA. I was right off of Sunset Boulevard. So as you can imagine, it's drastic. I love it here. I think it suits where I am at in my life and how some of the things I've figured out about myself and my nervous system, and how I was maybe moving against my nervous system living in LA. And so now I'm here and it's like, oh, medicine that I didn't think I needed, but I so needed. I have a private practice here right in town, and 2 children, a husband, and a life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're a therapist, and your being a therapist is one of the reasons I became a therapist, of course, because we do the same things in our lives.
Yeah. There are themes there in our friendship.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to the topic of grief, then, can you share just whatever it is you want to share about your grief story?
How much time do you have?
All the time in the world for you.
My grief story, I don't know if would it be helpful to talk about the types of grief I've gone through, or, yeah. Okay.
Sure. When you think about grief and your life with grief, or your experiences with grief, just however it is that you kind of define or make sense of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. Part of my neuro stuff is being very literal, and grief is not literal. It's like, it's so gray and multi-layered. And so I guess real grief didn't really occur. Actually, many of the grief that I've experienced actually started in LA. So it's so ironic that the time that we met and all of the things that kind of went on and that were pivotal in my grief story, anywhere from watching and losing a significant other and being in that space with his last breath. That was really many things. So overwhelming. I was still in my 20s, and that was just really tough to even find words to describe the feeling. There's obvious grief where you lose someone, right? It's like a death, literal death. And then there's grief which came right after. The timing, my health started to deteriorate. I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and this was when I was 30. So I'm like, here I am. I have my life to live, and then, oh my gosh. And so having the denial of that and not really embracing it the way I maybe could have, should have, I don't know, but that was a pretty big grief. And then I experienced a divorce. Mm-hmm. And so again, I'm not losing someone, but I'm losing someone. And that was a complicated thing. Nonetheless, another grief.
Yeah.
And then, finding my husband now, 10 years ago, meeting him, and miscarriages and many family members getting sick. And so just trying to kind of make sense of, wow, these really big scary things happen and you lose sense of like not who you are, but like what's going to happen next. So it's like I started to not trust, like being healthy and relationships lasting, even people living. So I started to form really protective parts that at the time were not healthy, but I didn't know any better. With my own growth and my own therapy and everything else, I started to realize, oh, wow, okay, well, nothing's really permanent and you have one life to live and this is a process of life. And so how do you want to embrace it, move forward rather than deny it and fight against it and reject it? Another really big part of grief, something I experienced with you for the first time, and I didn't have the words for it back then, but it is a vicarious grief. And so that was really hard. That was very complicated, being you so close to you and also feeling so guilty that I wasn't fixing it, solving it, making you feel better. And at the same time, losing you because our friendship, I lost you, because you were grieving. And so it's like, again, didn't know it at the time, but those classic Kubler-Ross, I went through all of them with you and lots of them were bargaining. Well, why don't we just go out tonight? Again, early 20s, mid 20s, living in Los Angeles, like maybe distract her. And then, each attempt, it wouldn't stick. It was like, I couldn't get you. And so there was a grief there, but also a vicarious grief.
I just want to give a little context here. So Bridget and I were best friends when we were living in LA, and like I didn't even technically live at her house, but I did. We shared a bed. I slept in her room most of the time. And so at the time of Beau's death, which Beau was my person who died, who was the most significant death that I experienced, but Bridget was literally with me when I got that phone call, and then was with me in the following days, weeks, months after his death. And being my best friend, from my perspective, she was like my soul, it's a like support person at that time. So Bridget, I really want to hear more about what that experience was like for you, being thrown in the situation neither of us asked for, that it changed the course of both of our lives. As you're saying, there wasn't anything you could do to fix it. What was that all like for you?
What was that all like for me? I wasn't ready for it. It was so hard. I was scared of it. I was really scared.
What were you scared of?
Just losing you, and again, starting this interview, it's this kind of words can't describe the connection and the force really that we had when we met, and so, and I, that was my biggest fear was, oh my God, I'm going to lose that. I'm going to lose that. I can already actually feel that loss. And I was so scared of it. I was like, and again, some of the parts that I've learned about to try to have, fix it was anxious. It was very anxiety provoking having to figure out, which it wasn't mine to figure out, as we know. But again, I felt a responsibility. I don't know why, but I felt responsible, not for, Beau's dying, but like for your comfort, for your support. And I felt like I wasn't getting it right. And again, it wasn't that at all. It was, oh my God, she just needs time to grieve. And I was scared. I was scared of losing you. I was scared of things changing. And what was honestly so devastating, for me is when you left LA. I felt, honestly, that was like a death. That was a death. And I was lost. And made some really bad decisions and gotten some unhealthy relationships. And I was grieving, and I don't think I let myself grieve you leaving. So again, things that I learned later in life. But yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I might cry now just talking about it. Because at that time, I was so absorbed in my own situation, in what had just happened, because it was the biggest possible loss I could imagine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what is true for any of us when we're in that recent of and deep of a grief, is that it's very self-absorbing. The fact that I made this decision to leave LA and what that meant longer term wasn't even on my radar. It was just like, I cannot be in this city anymore. I have to get out. So it was this, in some ways, like a rash decision made without the ability to see any future repercussions from. And it's only really been in recent years that I've been able to reflect back on that decision and what that meant for us and our friendship and what that must have been like for you.
Yeah.
That was so hard because we were so dynamic, and it just
So dynamic.
disappeared overnight because of what happened.
Right. And I loved you, I loved you so much that I, as we know now, just because you moved out of LA did not stop us from still sharing that dynamic relationship, like whether you be coming to LA or I going to, traveling to, a lot of the time you moved to Reno and then Portland.
Not Reno, but Portland. And
I'm
Arizona.
sorry, and Arizona. And so, I mean, you moved, but we followed each other.
Yeah.
It was like, there was no, it wasn't like any skips or jumps or blinks. I mean, it was right back every time we saw each other, right back to where we left off, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was so disorienting for me. And also, it was so hard to reconcile I just wanted so badly to not feel guilty. I felt so selfish.
What did you feel selfish about?
Because I didn't want you to grieve. I felt like it was taking you away. It was consuming you to a point where you weren't going to find yourself out of it. And there was nothing I could do to fix it. Like, who am I to fix someone's grief? I mean, now we learned it. But I just felt so like, it's hard to describe, but really remembering lots of empathy too, because I was there with you the second you found out, and it was shocking and almost kind of, there was like a denying to it. Like, what do you mean? We just talked to him last night, type of thing. So so that, I mean, there was empathy, there was my own grief, there was vicarious grief, there was fear, and there was, guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling selfish that I didn't want you to have to go through that.
So did you feel both those at the same time at that time? Do you remember? Like, you felt selfish, like you wanted me, but then you also felt bad about feeling selfish, like you could recognize that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I think the situation is not just for somebody who's in the position of being like one of the closest support people for somebody who's really heavily grieving. I'm sure that your situation is very similar. And I'm sure that what you're describing would resonate with a lot of people in that situation. And recently for me, I've been somewhat in that position. About a year ago, my boyfriend's brother died, and I found myself being the number one support person in that. Mm-hmm. And despite knowing all the things I know and having gone through the personal experience that I've gone through, I still felt some of those things come up. Let me just fix it,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Just wanting wanting him to hurt, wanting to be able to ease that in some way, which has just shifted my perspective a bit, even better understanding what your experience was at the time of Bose. But given all that we know now from age and from the work that we've done and the education that we've done, is there anything, if this happened today, is there anything or any way that you think you'd be different?
With
or
you
you'd want
or
to be
with
different
anyone?
with anybody who was very close to you?
Oh, man. Yeah, I wouldn't be so scared of it. I wouldn't feel, I mean, these are all hypotheticals, but
Yeah, how you would want to show up.
like I would feel less scared and more open to not having the words. And it's okay to not have the words, and really just sharing a space with whatever anyone is feeling in their grief, whether it be shock, denial, anger, whatever, just to be in it and not have to have this agenda to fix it, make them feel better. I would validate them more. I mean, maybe there was validation back then, but with you, I just remember my focus more was making sure you didn't hurt.
I was hurting.
Of course, rationally, I knew you were hurting and I knew you had to hurt. But there were these two parts of me that they were, oh my gosh, like they were battling. So now I wouldn't battle those things. And I wouldn't try to find the right words, and I wouldn't try so hard to, I would literally just be with my friend, literally just be there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the most simple thing, but it's not the easiest.
Also, you'll know when people feel safe with you because they come to you, and that's enough. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was just enough to exist in your grief. I thought I had to be more to exist in your grief, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you didn't at all.
Yes, I know now.
Well, yes.
We know so much more now.
Yeah.
In our ripe, impressionable 20s, it's like, wow.
Well, I'd also like to hear, if you're open to sharing, some more about what you alluded to a little bit ago about your significant other's death.
Yeah, it was well after you left, but I had met someone. It was a few months long, but very dynamic, a connection with this man that we spent significant time with. We traveled a bit together. We went on the same trip together, and he came back sick and I didn't come back sick. We thought nothing of it, right? But after a couple of days, I started to get sick. It became really bad. In fact, I went to urgent care. This was in 2012, actually almost a year. It was March 21st. So it's been 13 years, I believe. But yeah, I came back. I don't know if it was accurate, but it was whooping cough that I had, but I got the appropriate medication. He went to his doctor, but he didn't get the appropriate medication. And so it turned into, he was 27 years old. It turned into fast acting sepsis. And so he got rushed to the hospital. He was there for about a week. I met his older brother, his best friend's wife, and another good friend of his. We were all with him until he died, took his last breath. It was an experience. Some of it I blocked out. It was a surreal feeling. After that, I really went downhill. I was self-destructive, not in any harming ways like cutting or anything, but I made some pretty bad choices in my relationships thereafter and wasn't taking good care of myself. Again, running away from grieving and, kind of got into another relationship that I was previously in. And that is when I got married a couple years later. And like I said before, that ended very abruptly in a divorce. That was a death. So lots of these relationships ending, life ending. I really do believe I went into that marriage really wounded and, wasn't probably the best thing to do to get married to that person. But again, wounded and feeling, So, but I mean, hence the divorce right after.
Absolutely. Get married?
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And then after that, I was really at rock bottom. I think I even called you one day and I just didn't. I was, what am I doing? And when that happened, I shut off to everybody. I didn't tell hardly anyone what was happening except you and my other childhood best friend who was living in the home that I shared with my husband at the time. I didn't tell anyone unless I had to. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed, riddled with grief. But the one thing I remember was just working. And I was in my postdoc, pre or postdoc. And so I just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And that was my grief. I would just channel it into, and it served me. Yeah. I mean, it served. It was great. But it was just prolonging my grief. And then after so much time, this was like 10 years ago, I met now my husband, who I've been married to for 8 years. We've been together for 10. We met right after. And I knew, again, I was like, I don't want to do this over again. And so I need to get some help. So he was persistent. He saw what I didn't see. He met me, a wounded bird. Really? I mean, like, I have this death. I have this divorce. I have Crohn's disease. I have all these things. Like, wait, and he saw more than those labels. And so I really feel like I got into therapy because of him. So I wanted to do psychodynamic work, and I did. Learned a lot about what I was trying to do, which was run away. Lots of flighting. Biting and flighting is what I did to process grief and discomfort. Then I got pregnant and I knew, oh my God, I can't continue these themes in my relationships. I have to kind of overcome some of these things and learn from them. It was really meeting my husband, getting pregnant, the start of my healing, if you will. I mean, there's so much that has happened. It's like hard to talk about it chronologically. Yeah. But I just remember like finally getting out of Los Angeles and being like, oh my God, okay, I'm safe. And then really starting my work. And my work, I started it in Maine, actually. The therapy I did was in Maine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was such a chaotic time, but it also sounds like there's a lot, like in hindsight, you can see a lot of that chaos being fueled by the grief or the avoidance of the grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are you much of a yoga practitioner?
So funny you say that because I used to run marathons, avid spin, high intensity. But again, as I'm aging, as I'm healing, as I'm growing, I am now doing bar and yoga. Oh. Yes. Yes, I am, which I always think of you because I'm like, I would go to hot yoga and I'd go to yoga classes with you whenever I would visit you, but I would just gravitate to like the high intensity stuff, But
Yeah.
working with my functional medicine practitioner, and, other therapists are like, well, your nervous system might not need or want high intensity, especially if you have some anxiety and, health stuff. So I've been getting more into yoga.
Yeah, I remember I could occasionally pull you along with me to a yoga class, but it wasn't your number one thing. But you did say something a few minutes ago about, well, it wasn't about yoga, but it pointed to kind of a teaching from yoga when you talked about coming to this realization of all of this stuff and chaos that was going on, and you could continue to live in that, or you could find a way to kind of, I'm going to use my terminology, but relax around it or soften with it or something along those, to stop fighting it in maybe another way.
Resisting it, right?
Yes, resisting it. Yes, that's your
Yeah.
those were your words, I think. Which, in different words, if I had to say, one big takeaway I've gotten from my yoga practice as it relates to both grief and just life in general, it's learning the places where I resist against the reality of whatever is happening, seeing that and seeing the additional layers of suffering that causes, and understanding that I can choose to keep doing that, or I can choose to do something different, and being able to see that distinction there and make different choices. That for me, I learned through yoga and through a yoga practice. And that was probably the most transformative lesson to learn for me, specifically as it related to my grief. But you learned that not through yoga, another way. How did you learn?
Well, gosh, it's like such a hard question. But how did I learn to work with the resistance and soften and choose?
How
Is
did
that
you
the
learn
question?
how or where did you learn that you were creating greater resistance for yourself? You learned to first see that and understand that, and then learn that was a choice you could make, whether or not to continue doing that or to choose different.
Well, really, therapy was good for me. Just kind of having someone call out clear themes with the way that I exist in discomfort. One of them was I withstand it. I'm a big withstander, and really kind of finding ways. Again, this is what I used to do, like finding ways to endure something, right? But I think that through, also like being a mom with also learning that a lot like like when you went through your grief, it's like, this baby's going to cry and it's just going to need to cry because this is the way that it, is communicating to me, and I'm going to have to just let it cry.
Yeah.
Because if I try to stop it, it's not meeting his needs, and he just needs to cry. Needs were always met, but sometimes babies just cry. And so I had to surrender to this thing about, making it feel better, making it not feel pain and really, you know what? I think it had a lot to do, which again, later on, I've learned that I needed it for my nervous system because I felt dysregulated. So I learned a lot of things about my grief and my nervous system and my regulation and dysregulation through having a kid, especially a child on the spectrum too, which, there's some grief in that too, but also absolute celebration. But anyway, so through being a mom, learning how to surrender sometimes and knowing that it's okay because I know he's safe, he's fed, he's, Does that make sense? Okay.
I really love that. I have never heard that metaphor or thought of it in terms of grief is a baby, but I love it. It feels so accurate.
Yeah, because you just got to let it do its thing, grief has to have language, its own language.
Yeah.
It needs to express. It needs to have an outlet. It needs to live in a way, a lot like a baby.
A lot like a
with
baby.
with visceral, primal needs, a lot like grief.
Yeah. And it's kind of unpredictable.
Totally. Totally.
I'm at the most inopportune time.
Oh, God. So the softening was, also there is something to be said about exercise, I remember going through the first death that I talked to you about, the Crohn's diagnosis. I mean, most recently, my brother's been diagnosed with a chronic form of leukemia. And so having to go really in the cancer clinic at Dartmouth and, really seeing him go through it and me being helpless. Again, I felt it brought me back to that time with you. And so I guess actually full circle with your question earlier about what would you do differently, I actually did do differently with my brother, Glenn. And I was just with him, and he was going through many things and anxiety, fear. What does this mean? This is chronic. Am I, am I going to live? Am I going to die? And just providing space for him and surrendering to that. You don't need to placate him or, you don't need to minimize it. Trying to use the right words here. You don't need to solve this. You can't solve this. And he has every right to have grief around this, just like I have every right to have grief around this. Mm-hmm. There's vicarious grief with him. So yeah, there was a softening. It hurt. It hurts, but it's almost easier to soften than to resist something that's natural.
Yeah. I'm not saying this in the context of trying to find a silver lining in grief, because I don't love that approach. But what you're saying also sounds to me like you were able to show up in the way that you were and be that support that you were and have been for your brother because you at some point eventually stopped running from and avoiding grief.
Correct.
And if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have been able to do this for your brother.
Yes.
Which is huge and beautiful.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I was hurting and going through my own feelings while I was with him, obviously. But yeah, I didn't. That's the whole thing. I was able to have my feelings. I was in my hotel room. I went with him. I was his person to start chemo and immunotherapy at the same time. It was like a 4-day stint and I stayed in a hotel and I remember, oh my God, I am buzzing with anxiety. He had a really hard time. His body rejected the medicine. It was a really scary moment. All nurses on deck. But I was like, keep it together. I got to be this person for him, which I was. But when I came back to my hotel room, I was buzzing and buzzing and buzzing with anxiety. And I remember reaching out to my functional med practitioner. I said, what do I do? What do I do? And she said, here is, what's her name? Suki Baxter. Here's some polyvagal responses that you can do, techniques you can do to locate some of that polyvagal parasympathetic relaxation. I did yoga that night. I remember I didn't sleep a wink. It was like 3 a.m. and I was up doing stretching and yoga. I mean, this is me who used to run marathons. Okay. So that says something that my body, I'm not a yogi, but I went to yoga when my body was buzzing, which I was like, I remember at 3 a.m. I'm like, who am I doing yoga now?
At 3 a.m., awake at 3 a.m.
Exactly.
Well, I'm no longer 20.
No, I'm in my downward dog. It's like, what is happening here? But it allowed my nervous system to soften. And I love that my intuition went there,
Yeah.
which is not necessarily normal for me to go there because I'm not, again, I don't, if I were to exercise, I would say, yeah, let's go run, let's
Yeah.
go do a boot camp, not yoga. But in
Yeah.
that moment, I chose yoga.
Yeah. Well, I would wonder too if maybe your intuition has always been there, with those little nudges when you needed it.
Exactly. I resisted.
to run.
I was the queen of running. Isn't that funny? I used to run marathons, queen of
Yeah.
running away,
Too bad we couldn't pick up on that then.
Where are you running from? Are you okay? Lives we've lived.
I'm curious too about, and I want to just acknowledge the miscarriages. 2 miscarriages, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah. That you have had and that you brought up earlier. Just in one, acknowledging those, but then 2, the curiosity about how much, if ever, do you ever think about those experiences? And in what way do you think about those, I'll call them beings, but you can call them whatever you want them.
Well, one was in Los Angeles, and one was here in Maine. How do I think about them? Well, for a while, I wasn't really thinking about them. Again, protection, and what I like now is that I don't know, psyche, I get memory allows me to go there naturally. Meaning, like you said, it randomly, it will be like an LCD song. I remember driving it was like 7 a.m., driving to Maine Health. I was 10 weeks pregnant. I had an ultrasound. I felt intuition that something was not right. And it was right, no heartbeat, so on and so forth. And so it's interesting how the different senses, like a song, a certain sign on the side of the street will instantly take me back there. And the old me would be disassociate, whatever. But now because I trust it and I know it's not scary, I go there. I can access some of those feelings, not necessarily as raw as they were in the moment, but I can access the feeling. I can access the, timestamps, which is good for me because I used to kind of run away and disassociate, distract. So I think even about what it would be if they were alive. And I also think about my husband and who also held me through those times, which talk about vicarious grief. I mean, he has seen me go through a lot of grief. And I've been so curious about him. He's kind of a stone cold, non-emotional, and I've always wondered about how he felt, what he experienced with me going through the grief, and also what he was experiencing because he lost too. But he's less expressive emotionally than I am. I think about a lot of things there with, how I must have seemed, what I,
Yeah.
I hope I answered that question.
Do you feel any sense of connection with them in any way?
I'm not religious, although I grew up Catholic, confirmed in the Catholic Church. I know we're near Catholic, but I am not really religious. But when I am working through something, it is when I do think of them mostly.
Sure. Like something hard in your life?
Yeah, right. And that I seek soothing from. Well, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel that sense of soothing?
I don't feel alone. I feel that almost like I feel assured, like I feel supported. I feel seen and held. I know it's abstract, but
Yeah.
there's such an intimacy with grief, and there's such an intimacy with the specific people I've lost, that when I'm going through something so vulnerable and painful and uncomfortable and challenging, I go to them because I've experienced that with them.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
I've experienced that with them. So here I am again, but they're not here. But if I just, and again, it's all natural. I naturally do this. I think of them. I talk to them almost as they're like, "Oh, we get you." So like, "Oh yeah, yes, we've been there with you." There's no language to it, but it's a type of a feeling I'm trying to explain. Because it's like, oh, when have I last felt this? It was with this, it was with them. It was, there's complexities there, but it's hard to put words to some of these things. But
But I think you did a good job. I can feel what that would be like and how that would make sense and how that might feel for you.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any belief system around death? What happens when we die?
I don't know how to answer that. I'm still working through that. I feel resistance when people are like, nothing. I don't connect to that, but I don't know. I know it's energy. There's something with energy.
Oh, there sure is.
Right? I mean, there's something energetic that I can't explain. That is also very soothing and reassuring to me.
Yeah.
But my beliefs around death is that I don't know. There's a manifestation of energy that I cannot, it's like words fall too short. I can sense it. I can feel it. I'm intuitive to it at times. It's like not an ending, right? I don't feel like there's an ending.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've gone through a lot. Is there anything else about grief, about your experiences with it, that you feel is still left unsaid?
No, maybe left unsaid, but grateful towards it now that I am not so fearful of it.
You feel grateful towards grief? Is that what you're saying?
Like, it has really helped me. I mean, that I can allow myself and give myself permission to grieve. And once I did that and do that, it has really allowed me to grow and live authentically in the ways that I want and need. But yeah, I guess I would just say gratitude towards it. It's hard as hell. It's so uncomfortable. It's painful. It never ends, as we know. But it does pass. Right? Like, if you just allow yourself to feel it. When you just accept it, it teaches you. It's trust. So I'm really grateful for that.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's true for me, although I don't think I've ever said I'm grateful for grief, but it's true.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can never see it.
No.
Right?
It's impossible.
Gratitude.
I
Yeah.
like it. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation.
Of course.
It's
Of course.
not something we talk about often or
No.
but
We did it, you know? We got through it.
Yeah, we did. Thank you to my BFF, Bridget or Bubs, for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here with me, Laura Walton, and my incredible guest on Grief on Purpose. Your presence is a gift, and I'm so grateful you're walking this path with us. For more connection and resources, you'll find everything you need in the show description. To my guests, thank you for sharing your person with us today. It is truly an honor to know your story. I'm your host, Laura Walton. Until next time, be kind to yourself and remember you're not alone in your grief. We are here on purpose.